everyone, and welcome to an Americans for Limited Government live stream. I'm Catherine Mortensen, Vice President of Communications at Americans for Limited Government. Joining me today is Robert Romano. He is the Vice President for Public Policy here at Americans for Limited Government. Welcome, Robert. I haven't had you on in a while, so I'm so happy to have
it's great to
you
be
on.
back.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so what we want to talk about today, and I want to put up our fancy little, oops, I messed that one up. Sorry, folks. Technical error. What we want to talk to you about today is Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema come out completely opposed to changing the filibuster, basically eliminating the filibuster in order for Joe Biden to pass his vote rigging bill. So first of all, let's watch a short video of President Biden this week down in Georgia, where he is announcing how he wants to pass his bill by eliminating the filibuster. So let's take a look at that.
I'm making it clear, to protect our democracy, I support changing the Senate rules, whichever way they need to be changed to prevent a minority of senators from blocking action on voting rights. When it comes to protecting majority rule in America, the majority should rule in the United States Senate. Today.
All right. So that was President Biden down in Georgia. What is your reaction, Robert, to his proclamation?
Well, he wants to pass his election nationalization bill. It was H.R. 1, then it became H.R. 4. Sinema and Manchin, I think they'd like to vote for it if only they could get to cloture, if only they could have some bipartisan support for it as well, so that you could get to cloture, get to 60 votes. Under Senate rules, it takes 60 votes to get to a final vote on legislation. This guarantees virtually bipartisan cooperation is necessary to pass legislation. And Biden's saying, that's been around for 100 years. We don't need it anymore. So this is very, this is a crossroads for America. And so what Manchin and Sinema are now doing is saying, no way, we're not doing that. As soon as we do this, Republicans will be back in power, and they'll be able to push agenda items that we don't like. And so I think that you have to do a lot of soul searching when you think about this, because what Sinema and Manchin are doing is stepping above the partisan fray, as it were, to say, no, wait a second, we don't want our party to have that much power. So what Biden's doing is certainly a power grab, so that they can, with the barest of majorities, ram through their agenda, not just on H.R. 1 or H.R. 4, but the Build Back Better. I think they'd like to get the final passage on that. I think they want to do D.C. statehood, Puerto Rico statehood. They'd like to do a legislative public option for health care, which is even bigger than Obamacare, if you could imagine that. They'd like to do a lot of things. They'd like to pack the Supreme Court. So, but for the filibuster, all those things probably would have already happened. So when you react to Biden saying, let's get rid of this, you're probably greatly alarmed, particularly if you voted for former President Trump or Republicans in Congress, et cetera. And so I think that this is an important crossroads for America. And it looks like Manchin and Sinema are leading us down the same road we've been on, which is that the filibuster isn't going anywhere.
Yes. And Robert, you lead us right into the next clip I want to share. And this is Kyrsten Sinema on the floor of the Senate. It was either this morning or late yesterday. And she gave a great speech. And we're just going to show you about a 2-minute clip of it. I think you're going to like what she has to say. And she really does frame it, as you said, Robert, in terms of the bigger picture of what our nation needs at this time. So let's watch this.
Politics are cyclical. And the granting of power in Washington, D.C. is exchanged regularly by the voters from one party to another. This shift of power back and forth means the Senate 60s vote threshold has proved maddening to members of both political parties in recent years, viewed either as a weapon of obstruction or a safety net to save the country from radical policies, depending on whether you serve in the majority or the minority. But what is the legislative filibuster other than a tool that requires new federal policy to be broadly supported by senators representing a broader cross-section of Americans, a guardrail, inevitably viewed as an obstacle by whoever holds the Senate majority? but which in reality ensures that millions of Americans represented by the minority party have a voice in the process. Demands to eliminate this threshold from whichever party holds the fleeting majority amount to a group of people separated on two sides of a canyon, shouting that solution to their colleagues, and that makes the rift both wider and deeper. Consider this. In recent years, nearly every party line response to the problems we face in this body, every partisan action taken to protect a cherished value, has led us to more division, not less. The impact is clear for all to see. The steady escalation of tit for tat, in which each new majority weakens the guardrails of the Senate and excludes input from the other party, furthering resentment and anger amongst this body and our constituents at home.
So, Robert, what is your initial reaction? And by the way, Robert, before you get into that, I want to encourage everyone who's out there watching, please join the conversation. Send us a message, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. We love to put up your comments, answer your questions, and really make this very interactive. So really, Robert is the Vice President of Public Policy here. Try to stump him. He's very deep into the weeds a lot of times on the issues. I would love to see if somebody can throw him a question that he couldn't answer, because I'm guessing you won't be able to. But Robert, go ahead with your reaction to Sinema's remarks on the Senate floor.
So basically what she's doing here is standing up for the institution of the Senate the way it's been for more than 100 years. The filibuster began in 1917 as 3/4 of the Senate had to vote in order to get to cloture on legislation. And then in the 60s and 70s, it was watered down to 66%, and then 2/3, and then down to 3/5 in the Jimmy Carter administration. They moved it down to 60 votes. And Democrats have had several filibuster-proof majorities in the Senate. In fact, FDR had one, LBJ had one, Jimmy Carter had one, Barack Obama had one, Bill Clinton didn't have one. And so, and by the way, every time Democrats win the presidency since FDR, they get the Senate and the House. And so when Trump won, we got the Senate and the House, but we didn't get a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. And so it's very typical in American politics where Democrats seem to be able to get bigger legislative majorities when they take the presidency than Republicans have been able to. So suffice to say, Republicans since 1917 have never, ever had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. And so I think when you see Republicans in power, this is something that's frustrating, I think, to conservatives who would like to get a lot more done, reform ancient programs that are just no longer there. Here's Willie Cush saying, have you called Sinema and Manchin to thank them for their stands? Well, while we won't call them, I'll praise them right now, because what they're doing is preserving two-party rule in the U.S. Senate. And that's what she's standing up for. She's saying when we're in the minority, we're going to want to stop Republican bills. And so because I laid it out for you what they would do if they could get rid of the filibuster. You would have Puerto Rico, D.C. statehood. They would pack the Supreme Court. They'd pass a public option. They'd do a legislative Green New Deal. And they do this election bill. They would do whatever they want. And so if you're of the mind, we need to stop these things when we're out of power, then you probably support what Manchin and Sinema did. But you should remember that the next time Republicans are in power, because there may be conservatives who say, wait a second, we haven't accomplished anything for a century. We need to get rid of the filibuster. So maybe you support it, getting rid of it, but only when you're in power. And maybe that tells you why perhaps it's a good thing.
And Robert, I do want to bring in an important question here. We're talking about the filibuster. That's a procedural, on the procedural side in the Senate. That's a measure that requires that you have to have 60 senators to pass, legislation. And of course, President Biden and the Democrats have what they claim is a majority. They have 50 Senate seats, and then they get that one extra from Kamala Harris. That is the slimmest of majorities. And
absolutely,
they do not have that 60 vote majority, which is what you need overcome the filibuster.
Oh yeah, but you would need bipartisan support usually. So maybe they could get to 55 instead of 50, right? Maybe what if they had done that in 2020? Well, they
Okay,
didn't accomplish that.
so we're talking about that, but why are we concerned about the filibuster and Sinema and Manchin saying they will not eliminate it? Because what really the bigger question here is President Biden wants to pass what I call a vote rigging bill. It's a series, two bills. He wants to bring them together, and these two bills together would really radically transform our election system. Robert, do you want to go into a little bit about what those bills are and why they are so bad?
Well, the one that they're pushing right now would bring back Justice Department pre-clearance of any changes to state election law. As everyone watching is aware of, state legislatures, particularly Republican state legislatures, have been changing the laws, particularly since 2020, to firm up voter ID requirements, tamp down on mail-in ballots. That proved to be very consequential in Joe Biden's 2020 win of the presidential election. But for the mail-in ballots being so rampant during the pandemic, Trump probably would have easily won re-election. So I think Republicans are looking at the issue saying, wait a second, we need ballot integrity first and foremost. Here's Jim Burnup. The unfavorable bills that may get passed this year can do great damage to our country's future. Will any of them be extremely difficult to reverse with a Republican majority after elections? That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. We won't repeal any of those things if you don't have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. Now, if they get rid of the filibuster, then yes, Republicans could, when they come back in power, repeal all of those things that were done. And that's what Sinema's arguing, is saying, wait a second, if you want to have laws that last longer than 4 years or 8 years, you need to have a filibuster. That way it's really difficult to repeal legislation that enjoyed strong bipartisan support when it was enacted. And so that's her argument for keeping it. And you could say that's a good argument for the institutions, but if you actually wanted to pass things. So can I share my screen?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to share my screen here because this is actually just came up a few years ago with different, let's see here. We want to do that one. Okay. We're going to allow it. Okay. There's my screen.
And then let's see, I think I need to add it. There we go.
All right. So this was a few months ago where Biden was proposing killing the filibuster on March 25th. I wrote this article. He'll kill it to nationalize election law. Manchin at the time stood up and said, wait a second, we're not getting rid of the filibuster, and really pouring cold water on it. But back in 2017, this was President Trump on the same exact issue. And he says, quote, for our friends in the Senate, oh boy, the Senate, remember this. Look, the Senate, we have to get rid of what's called the filibuster rule. We have to. And if we don't, the Republicans will never get anything passed. You're wasting your time. So that was Trump's view on it, like that you could actually have Republican policies be able to be passed if he could have just had a 51 vote threshold. Now, let's make a really clear point, though. During those years, I don't think there were 51 Republicans to repeal the filibuster, first and foremost. But even under budget reconciliation, they couldn't even get tepid repeals of parts of Obamacare done. Like John McCain, he jumped ship, and then he wasn't going to let them pass anything, even on budget reconciliation. So clearly you need more than just 51 to, I think, do what either Trump is saying here, what Biden was calling for, and what he's calling for now. I think that, and it's being proven right now. They can't pass anything. Biden's legislative agenda, he's the weakest first-term Democratic president since Grover Cleveland. He can't get much of anything done right now. And if you're a conservative and you want to see those things fail, well, then maybe you like the filibuster right now.
Pamela Harrell says Biden and the Democrats want to pass bills that not only hurt America, but destroy America. So this vote rigging bill that they want to pass, Pamela, what it would do is it would give the federal government almost complete control over local elections, so that if you have Democrats in charge in Washington in the Department of Justice, they could go in and micromanage the elections at the very local level. And we've heard President Biden say over and over again, it's what really counts is who counts the vote, right? They want control of the process of the election, counting from start to finish. And that would be, I think, really lead to the destruction of America. because you could have one party rule. They would rig every election in their favor. So I think you're right, Pamela. A lot of Americans are very concerned that what the Democrats are trying to do would lead to the destruction of our republic as we know it.
Well, let me interject there just slightly. I think Republicans are going to have a very good year this year. 2022 is shaping up to be a red wave, frankly. Joe Biden, Quinnipiac just did a poll where he said 35% approval. Like, this is not only they're going to get crushed in the midterms, the Democrats and Biden. Like, this is approaching the territory where he's going to have trouble either getting himself reelected or whoever stands in for him in 2024. And so I think they're desperate to get as much stuff done right now as possible because they know that they're about to lose power. And that's where Sinema's standing in saying, wait a second, guys, you aren't going to hold on to power forever. I mean, she could go even further and say, you're probably going to lose the election this year, but that would be too dispiriting, I think, for Democrats to realize. But Democrats know this. They know it's happening. You can already see the red wave building in New Jersey and Virginia. With the elections last year for governor, Republicans came within a hair's breadth of taking New Jersey, and Republicans have reclaimed the governor's mansion in Virginia for the first time in more than a decade because of that red wave that's already building, that frustration that you're feeling right now. People are ready to vote right now on the Republican side. Democrats, they're divided. Particularly on the filibuster, but also just in general on what do they do? What's their agenda? And I think they're seeing the wheels come off of the train right now. And that's what explains the desperation of Biden to try to overturn a century of Senate precedent. He used to defend the filibuster. Joe Biden used to defend the institution of the Senate until it suited his partisan interests. And so I think people, and it's really hard for people to break free of that kind of thinking. Like, you would only support eliminating the filibuster when your party's in power. But that's the state of politics. That's the Federalist number 10. This is James Madison telling you about factions in the Federalist Papers. The framers of the Constitution were the smartest people in politics probably ever because they devised a system that would prevent the one-party rule that could lead to the collapse of republics. And we've seen this. And, when totalitarian states rise, it's usually on one-party rule. In Germany, it was democratically enacted. They got a 38% majority in the parliament, or plurality in the parliament. They made Hitler chancellor, and then there was never another free election after that under Nazi Germany. So you don't want one-party rule. So I see the argument for keeping the filibuster if it preserves one two-party system where Republicans have a voice. And I'm telling you, Democrats have historically had legislative majorities bigger than Republicans. And they always seem to get a few more members of Congress than Republicans can get when they win the presidency. So if you want to move to a system where it's just 51, votes in the Senate, well, just be prepared for a legislative Green New Deal when the Democrats win. Be prepared for more states like D.C. and Puerto Rico. Be prepared for more Supreme Court justices. If you like the way things are. If you like the way things are now in terms of the institutions, then think twice about the filibuster. Be careful what you wish for. That's what Kyrsten Sinema is saying to her party. And sometimes you got to look in the mirror and say it to yourself, too. So you're reminded of reality is that this filibuster ain't going anywhere. So if you actually want to pass legislation, you might have to do it with a bipartisan majority. Nobody wants to hear that, though, when they've got the House, the Senate, and the White House. That's the dilemma Democrats have right now. That's why they're going to get wiped out in 2022.
Robert, thank you for that. And I want to share, this is going to be a full screen of Joe Manchin. He didn't give a speech on the floor like Kyrsten Sinema did. He just put out a long statement on his website, and I've taken a couple of excerpts from it. They're a little bit wordy, but I think that it's valuable for you to see what he wrote about this. So I will read along, and it'll show up on your screen here. So one moment. While many try to ignore this history, they do so without fully understanding the long-term institutional and democratic damage that this will do to the Senate and our nation. Allowing one party to exert complete control in the Senate with only a simple majority will only pour fuel on the fire of political whiplash and dysfunction that is tearing this nation apart, especially when one party controls both Congress and the White House. As such, as I have said many times before, I will not vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster. So hooray for Senator Joe Manchin.
Well, for now, but long term, I think that the filibuster is an obvious obstacle for future Republican presidents and senates and the House. I mean, you never have a filibuster in the House, so you don't actually have the problem over there. Passing legislation, reforming things that are, pushing a century, things like Social Security, you can't touch it. Things like Medicare, you can't do entitlement reform, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, any reforms that I think that from a free market perspective, a limited government perspective that you'd like to see, uh, I don't see how it's possible to get them done without either eliminating the filibuster or having a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. So
Well, Robert,
Republicans are going to have to go back to the drawing board and beat history. They'll have to, if they actually want to long-term see their agendas enacted. I mean, or you could do this piecemeal approach where you just prevent the other side from getting too much power too quickly, but in the long term, they're going to get everything they want. Eventually, they'll get a legislative proof, a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate again, because they've done it before. Obama had it, Carter had it, LBJ had it, FDR had it. I'm trying to remember if Truman had it. He may have had it too. And so they
well, I
almost
think
always have this advantage, and we never have this advantage. So Democrats, be careful what you wish for, because Republicans would actually be able to start passing legislation that would be incomprehensible to you. But you know what? Our allies overseas, they don't have filibusters in their legislatures. So I think we could actually, the American Republic, we had it, no filibuster until 1917. I think we would do just fine without a filibuster. So I'm not going to sit there and tell you K Street gets to run every bill through a bipartisan group of gang of nines, and that's the only thing that's ever going to pass. I'm saying that, long term, that this is something that this is a conversation that is interesting and it will prove valuable if it results in the ability to enact further limits on government. But if the end result of eliminating the filibuster was big government or tyrannical government, then I don't think any people really want to support it. So you're risking. Here's what Harry Reid risked when he got rid of the filibuster for judicial nominees, was a 6-3 constitutionalist conservative majority on the Supreme Court the moment Republicans got back into power, which they surely did. So if you're eliminating the filibuster because you think you'll never lose an election again because you passed some election bill, think again. They could pass their stupid election bill this year, and I think Republicans will still win. I don't think they can cheat enough to steal this red wave. They can't stop the red wave. It's already happening. It's everywhere. You're going to see Democrats voting Republican this year. In blue states, you're going to see governors who you thought were untouchable probably losing this year because Joe Biden is a failed leader. This is a failed Congress, and all they can do is reach for power and try to guarantee one-party rule only for Democrats, and I don't think we support that right now. So I think it's okay to say thank you, Kyrsten Sinema, thank you, Joe Manchin, for not giving one-party rule to Joe Biden, who, as it turns out, is the most radical president I think we've seen since at least Barack Obama, but he's doing things that are frankly more radical than Barack Obama, unbelievably.
Robert, I'm just going to say one thing about that 60 vote majority. Like, that's what you need to overcome the filibuster. And how would one party get that 60 vote majority? By reaching into, like in our case, we would have to reach into blue states and bring those people over to voting red.
They're never going to do that. There's not a single senator on the Democratic side that will help Republicans cut taxes.
No, but I mean, not in the Senate, at the grassroots level, in the next election, when the Senate seats come up, we're going to have to win over more Americans to our argument. We're going to have to make the case that limited government will allow for greater prosperity and individual freedom. This is the case we have to make in those blue states. Now, is that possible? I don't know. But I think that that's the only way we as conservatives are ever going to accomplish our really important legislative agendas, is to get a 60 vote majority in the Senate. How do we do that? Going into the blue states, sharing our message of freedom and liberty and small government, and trying to bring them over to vote for Republican senators. That's how we're going to do it. I don't know if we can. It feels like our nation is so divided, but I think that's what Kyrsten Sinema is trying to say, is you can't take shortcuts and just eliminate the filibuster. What you have to do is win over the voters to your argument, make your case to them.
Imagine if we had gotten rid of the filibuster in 2017. what would Democrats have already done being in power for a year?
Right.
All the things I just mentioned, they would have already packed the Supreme Court. They would have already passed HR1, the election nationalization bill, instead of HR4, which now they're not going to pass that one either. DC statehood, Puerto Rico statehood. I want to show the listeners and the viewers which Senate seats are up this year, because it's relevant to this conversation and what you just said. Let me just share one more screen for you here. And here is the 2022 Senate seats that are coming up. There's a lot of Republican seats that are actually coming up. So you have critical elections in Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio. There's Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. We're defending a seat there. So where could Republicans pick up seats, though? Georgia and Arizona.
Yep, Georgia
Colorado,
and Arizona.
You talk about going into states. I don't think Georgia and Arizona are really blue states, despite Biden's narrow wins there, or Wisconsin for that matter. When you combine all the votes that on those swing states, Biden only won 2020 election by about 43,000 votes, 10,000 in Georgia, 10,000 in Arizona. They ain't overcoming the red wave unless they get presidential turnout in a midterm, which they ain't going to do. So those seats in Georgia and Arizona are very much in play. And so this is where the rubber meets the road. Nevada, that's another potential pickup there. I mean, you might write off states like Washington, Oregon, California, but there's also a lot of gubernatorial races. For example, in Michigan, there's a gubernatorial race against Gretchen Whitmer. So the red wave is going to be targeting those blue state governors. And you know, when you get a red state in a 2024 election cycle, that can prove to be very advantageous. You want the governor to be in your party when you show up to do a campaign spot, whichever side you're running on. So I just wanted to let people know which states are coming up. You can actually look this up, 2022 Senate elections. It's 50-50 right now. But, you know, I think most people are probably betting that Republicans will pick up the Senate majority this year. I don't know if you're you know, if you have any predictions in store for 2022 and what they might hold. But on average, you pick up about 30 House seats if you're in the minority and going into a presidential midterm, and you pick up about 3 seats in the Senate on average. So if that were true, Republicans would easily pick up the House again and certainly the Senate as well. So it seems to be leaning in that favor right now. We'll see what happens.
Thank you all for joining us today. Many of you may have joined because you got our email just a few minutes before we started. We want to remind you to click on the subscribe to YouTube that was in the email, or if you're watching us on YouTube right now, just click below and make sure you hit that little bell, and that little bell will make sure that you get notifications every time we do live streams and we upload new videos. We really want to bring more of you into this fight and share our message with you, because as Robert says, there are some very great opportunities in the next election cycle for Republicans to maybe pick up some more seats for lawmakers in the Senate who will support our limited government vision. And we're going to need each one of you in this fight. And the more of you who are watching our videos and sharing them, we will grow this community. And I think that we can take back our country and reclaim the vision that our founders had of, you know, individual freedom and a small government, which is really the core of what we're all about here at Americans for Limited Government. And we appreciate you joining us. And I'd want to just encourage you, if you have any more questions for Robert. Again, Robert is the Vice President of Public Policy here. He's probably the smartest guy. I don't want to compare it to Rick, but Robert is in the weeds on policy. He knows the history of elections and what's gone on in the past in our country. If anyone has a stumper for him, please give it a try. I've actually never seen him stumped on anything, but maybe today would be a first.
Just ask me a math problem or anything, you know, any STEM related questions. I'll probably not do well on those.
Oh my gosh. You know, and while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions for you, Robert, just to kind of wrap up the week, this has been a horrible week for President Biden and his agenda. I'll just start with, I believe it was Wednesday, inflation numbers came out, the highest in 40 years. Thursday, the Supreme Court ruled against his just sprawling, unconstitutional vax mandate on large employers.
Oh, yeah.
And then Yeah, Cinnamon and Manchin round out the week by putting a nail in the coffin of his vote rigging bill.
Yeah, and his legislative agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty. I mean, they're not going to build back better. I mean, they're trying to abolish the filibuster. You think Joe Manchin wants to, cross over now and then vote to pass this $3 trillion bill on budget reconciliation? I mean, you just see the rift getting wider and wider between those two senators and the White House, and it could mean that Biden's legislative agenda is all but dead right now. On the inflation, 7%. This is higher than anything we've seen since the early 1980s and the 1970s, and it keeps building. Even as Congress has, they passed any more big bills recently? Build Back Better hasn't passed, but the inflation is persistent. And Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government, has raised a very important point about this, which is that the supply constraints on the economy because of COVID, but also because of California-esque policies on trucking and ports, is constraining our supplies right now. And that means you have inflation is defined as too many dollars chasing too few goods. Here is Willie Cush. Are you for or against the Convention of States? I actually listened to Mark Levin for many, many years. And before he even published the Liberty Amendments, when he was talking about a secret project for a book, I guessed correctly that he was going to publish a book, the Liberty Amendments, that would propose an Article 5 convention. It's one of those things where it's never happened before. It'd be really fun to watch. Like, imagine watching a constitutional convention on television. It's a very long haul. You could check out Convention for the States, organization specifically geared towards moving state legislatures to support a constitutional convention. It's another one of those be careful what you wish for things, because you're going to have balanced budget amendments, but you're also going to have blue states at a convention, and they might propose Green New Deal amendments, or international trade with China amendments, or who knows, or amendments related to elections that you don't agree with. So if you like the Constitution the way it is, I think it's pretty darn good. It serves us pretty darn well. The Article 5 convention is a part of that. And so that's a democratic question. It's a political question with which state legislatures have discretion under the Constitution. It's something where I don't think they have enough support to get to a convention yet. But it would be interesting. I've followed that for many years. I think that Mark Levin, as he devised it, looked at the lay of the land, looks at the filibuster, and he says, wait a second, the way things are currently structured right now constitutionally are also a challenge. The filibuster is established under the Constitution, for an example, under Senate rules. Article 1 gives the houses of Congress the discretion to create a filibuster, to make it more difficult to pass legislation. So maybe that's something that Joe Biden should propose. Maybe he wants to change the Constitution. He doesn't need to do that, though. He just needs 51 senators to object to the parliamentarians saying, we didn't get the cloture, and then they vote 51 votes saying, yeah, we did. And then you would just vote to overturn the parliamentarian every time you want to pass legislation. And if you think that's a bad thing, obviously don't support anyone who's saying, get rid of the filibuster. It's the only way to pass anything. It's also the only, keeping the filibuster may be the only way to stop the hard left from taking over this country and imposing one party rule down our throats and putting an iron boot on our necks for the next 100 years. So be careful what you wish for.
And with that, Robert, we'll close it out. I want to thank everyone for being a part of our conversation today. We're just so grateful that you share our values and share our vision for America. And actually, Robert, I'll give you the last word. Any final thoughts?
Well, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications. Check out dailytorch.com. That is our flagship news site where you can get cartoons and the latest written commentaries. Also, latest Rick Manning interviews on talk radio. I believe we're transcribing those now, aren't we, Catherine?
Yeah, sometimes I'll go in and put a transcription of his conversations. So yeah, if you want more Rick Manning, go to dailytorch.com for sure.
Is missing Rick Manning today. We got to get Rick back in here for the next one, I think.
Yeah.
I'm happy to fill in though, and I hope you all enjoyed the live streams, please subscribe to that YouTube channel. Tell everybody. We're trying to break through the algorithm here. And since we started emailing you about the live streams, we've seen viewership jump like 1,000%. So we're getting hundreds or sometimes even thousands of views on some of these videos. And the views, that's what's going to tweak the algorithm. Also hit that like button, share it. That helps the algorithm as well. Or you could dislike the video. That helps too. Everything helps. Just interact with the videos. We love you guys. We really appreciate you. And, have a great weekend. It's Friday. Happy Friday.
All right. Stand by and I'll get our closing video. We'll see you next time on an Americans for Limited Government live stream.